So I'd like to introduce our guest this evening. Amy Campbell is the founder, owner, and producer of a weekly podcast and radio show, the Tennessee Farm Table Show, now in its 11th season. She's also an artist as well, and she was responsible for the artwork on our seed library in our adult services area. She's a Knoxville native who holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Savannah College of Art and Design and a master's degree of fine arts from the University of Tennessee. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Amy Campbell.
Well, gosh, that all sounded pretty good. Goodness, it doesn't feel that way when I'm just at home feeding the cat, watering the donkeys, whatnot. Yeah, that was a great intro. Yes, this is my podcast, radio show. I've always been involved with local food advocacy for years and years. I've done jobs and then at night done my art. So a lot of it has been PR to get farmers markets created and started, much like our Maryville Farmers Market that a group of us got going back in, I guess, 2004 or so. So all that, I just love talking with people and knowing people's stories, and that just led me to start recording about people's stories, and especially these stories that I don't want to disappear into obscurity. The reason I do this, sometimes I wonder, because it's a lot of effort and I don't get paid. My husband over there is the one that pays the bills. I can't stand to feel like all these old ways are being lost. And I can just do a little part as to be a vehicle for people's stories to be recorded and saved and shared. And the kind and generous people that trust me to tell their story in a respectful and accurate manner, I cannot say thank you enough to. For tonight, I've got three main chunks that I'd like to present. In the first one, I want to talk about Kermit Colleran and his family, Planting by the Signs. I want to say a word or two about Planting by the Signs. And then my third topic is Ida Spoon Wild on baking cornbread and making butter. A place of great importance is the Case Cove Preservation Association, which is located in this Thompson Brown home. It's a wonderful place. It serves as a repository for so many stories and memorabilia of people who moved out of Cades Cove and were forced to move out of their homes with the national park that took their houses. So I went over there to this wonderful place, and that's where I got some of these pictures of Kermit Colleran. And here is Kermit Colleran. This gentleman lived his whole life, all but 4 years in the Cove. He was born there in 1912, and he died in 1999 in the Cove. I think he tried to work a little bit in Alcoa, and he thought, I can't hunt, I can't fish. I'd rather try to make a living farming up in the Cove. Kermit was an industrious and smart man, and he made a living out of farming, and also he had all kinds of things he did. He was known for a lot of people as the bee man. Also, some people called him Mr. Cades Cove. And at the Cades Cove Preservation Association, Ruth over there wrote a few things I'd like to share with you about her father. To millions of visitors at the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Kermit Colleran was Mr. Cades Cove, or the Bee Man. He represented the fifth descendant generation from the pioneers of Cades Cove, from John and Lorraine Oliver, and Robert and Margaret Shields. Life wasn't easy in the Cove. And I added this, no electricity, sewage, or city water. And as soon as the lights go out, if we have a storm down here, am I ever ready for that air conditioning to come back on, right? I mean, life was tough. But that is where Kermit wanted to live, hunt, fish, raise bees, garden, all his life. And few appreciated Kermit's intelligence, savvy with the stock market, and his wit. Fewer still appreciated the loyalty and sacrifices of his wife, Lois, and family who stood by his side. So this is a little shortened version about the making of the park and how they had to move out. When the national park was created, most of y'all know this, they made everybody who were residents there at the park move out, and some of them ended up dying. They gave them a certain amount to live there, a certain amount of years. Some of them died, some of them moved out, and then some of them had to come lease houses from the Park Service. And so Kermit decided he wanted to still live there and live there that whole time until 1999. And I have to say too, this is only talking about European settlers from the 17 and 1800 traditions tonight, to say nothing about the centuries of other people that were on that land before the settlers. So this is just a tiny little slice of the corn pone here tonight, okay? I want you to know how I met this wonderful family. This right here is Rachel and John Davis. And one day I was playing that radio show and just minding my business and all this, and I heard from this Rachel here on the left, who is married to John. John is Kermit's great-grandson. And I think they call him Little John. They're the most wonderful family, and they're homesteaders. This woman, she has 5 children, and they raise all their food and all this old-timey stuff. They love this. And this is how I got to meeting this wonderful family. Rachel and John told me about Ruth, Parr, and Davis. And I said, I've got to meet Ruth. Here's a picture of Ruth bottle feeding a little baby pig. Is that not cute? As a little child. This picture comes from the Case Code Preservation Association. And this picture here on the right is one I took at one of the Case Code Preservation Association's homecomings that they had. That is Ruth with Rachel. I just can't express my gratitude enough for community here in Maryville, Blount County, Townsend, and how open people are to sit and talk with me and to meet me and let me record their stories, like Rachel and Ruth. And then, through that, I got to have the blessing of meeting Lois Schuler Corin. That is Kermit's widow, and she is 99 and a half years old. Yeah, she's still with us, and she is such a lovely person. And she let me come to her house. I asked her about Kermit, and she just was so free-flowing with her time, and she loved talking about Kermit. And I asked them to share a recipe, and this is a recipe that Ruth is going to talk with us over, and it's called chicken and crackers.
I guess the easiest and simplest recipe, and the one we've made most in the last few years, is Dad's mother. We called her Ma. Ma's chicken and crackers.
Yeah.
And anybody can get these ingredients, and it's not hard to fix. Of course, when a hen would quit laying or a rooster would get mean and flog people, that was the victim. And it would be slaughtered and dressed, and the skin would be left on it, but they'd cut it up in pieces and put it in a big pot, cover it with water and salt it, and boil it until that meat was tender. And then they'd take the big bread pan with the 2-inch sides on it, that's 2 foot by 14 inches or 18 inches or so, big pan, and fill it about 1 inch deep with broken up saltine crackers, and then lift the chicken out of the pot, bone in, and just put it all over the crackers and pour the broth over the top of that. and set it back in the oven and bake it until the crackers that were on top started to brown. And that's chicken and crackers.
Yum.
And it's good.
You cut it all up in little bunch of pieces
Well,
before boiling?
Just like you cut the legs and the wings and the thighs, and
Okay.
like you'd normally breast, and
Okay.
yeah.
How long about does it have to cook for?
Oh, I'd say 45 to 50 minutes at a good boil, if it's an old hen.
Or a mean
Not
old
a
rooster?
tender, yeah.
They will get mean.
They
Some of
do.
them.
They do.
We had a little bantam chicken, and I had to go out to the branch to wash clothes, and she'd want to go to the house and get a cracker. Every time she'd go to the house and get that cracker shot back out to me, she had to run to keep that chicken from flogging her. I don't know what he'd do, but anyway, she would run and cry.
Well, the last day of his life, he did get on my back. I fell or stooped down to pick up a cracker that I dropped, and he jumped up and flogged my back, and he was chicken and dumplings the next day. Daddy took care of him that night.
And in that, you heard Lois's voice as well chiming in there. And I just love that story. It's doing with what you have. And here is a picture of Kermit with Lois Schuler, Colin, his sweet wife, and goodness, raising all these kids and doing all this laundry and cooking on that stove, cold and hot. The work she did is amazing. So Kermit was a big beekeeper. Here he is in his bee outfit. And these two pictures come from the Case Code Preservation Association. And I believe Ruth brought these pictures and put them in there. And so they came from Ruth. Another recipe I recorded with Lois and Ruth was for squirrel dumplings.
Well, tell me, did you ever make squirrel dumplings? Or did your mother?
Yeah. My dad left squirrel, and after they moved out, there was woods over in front of where they was living, and he'd see a squirrel over there. He'd get his gun. He's a real good shot, Just one bullet, and he got it.
Wow, that's not easy. They're little and fast.
Did you make flour dumplings or
Yeah.
cornmeal dumplings?
Flour dumplings.
Did you?
Mm-hmm.
Could you kind of describe how you make squirrel dumplings? Do you mind to tell me?
Well, you just make it like you was making biscuit dough, and cut it in pieces, and drop that in that boiling juice around the squirrel. Or you take some of the meat out and give more room for just the liquid, and then put it all back together, take it to the table and eat.
I bet that is so delicious.
I never did care for I didn't like wildlife, and so I liked sausage gravy. I could make a meal on that.
Oh, and she could make good chicken gravy too.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, yummy.
Isn't that wonderful? Now, who in here's had squirrel dumplings? Oh, good, just a few. It's delicious. John and Rachel made it for me one night. That's their little boy's favorite, is a squirrel sandwich with ketchup. That's his favorite. Kermit was a major bee man. He raised so many hives. After they put the park in, all these people would be driving around the Case Cove Loop. I probably was as a kid too, back in the early 70s. And some people come across his place and think he was some kind of living history museum. They didn't realize it was his home. And he had all kinds of beehives, and he would sell honey. So this sign you see is saying honey for sale at the house. Not just that, he would share all sorts of seed. He saved seed from year to year, and he put it up, and he was very freely willing to share seed with visitors. There's this couple from Michigan a couple years ago brought some of that seed down that he initially had shared with them in the 1970s. And these artifacts of Kermit's are at this Case Code Preservation Association, There's his bee hat, and that's what he looked like without a hat. And just precious mementos of this precious man. And yeah, he bottled a lot of honey, and Lois told me he loved fruit. He loved fruit. He had all kinds of fruit trees. He'd share it with people. He'd even take a jar of honey to a neighbor that had moved away, right? He'd carry honey to people who'd moved on. And isn't this a precious picture, the sign on one of his honey boxes? This is too, I figure Ruth probably made sure this photo got into the association. And this is real sad. This was the house he lived in. He built it from the wood from the Campbell school. A really nice home. I mean, what a good builder. I can't build a bird box. But this is extremely sad. He died in 1999. He was laid to rest in his bib overalls. In February of 2002, family members in the Cades Co-Preservation Association altogether dismantled the house. The Park Service didn't think it was worthy of saving in their eyes, but it was very sad for this family. Little John even says he got out of school that day and was part of taking the house down. Mike Clemmer, who has the dulcimer shop up in Townsend, have y'all seen that place? He made a dulcimer out of the salvaged wood from his home. Mike's a good guy. So that's just about makes me cry. I mean, that was a sad day. Well, and I'm glad that his memories live on and that everybody's willing to share them. Okay, and I want to show you this next one. This is about Kermit's beans. He had this striped stick bean, or striped stick bean, and it is a delicious bean. And his great-grandson and Rachel, his great-granddaughter, they shared a bag of these beans with me one day, and I've been growing them ever since. This is an open and old-time heirloom bean. If you plant it next to some other kind of green bean, it's going to cross and you're going to get a hybrid, and then you'll never keep that genetic purity to that strain. And I used to be kind of like, well, green beans? What's so hot about green beans? Until I tried this green bean. These are delicious green beans. They're wonderful. In the association, they've got this jar of beans that Ruth brought, and some of the seed, and then the picture of Kermit and Lois. And so right now on my website, TennesseeFarmTable.com, is the whole story about that bean. And I've got a bunch to plant. If they do, I'm going to donate a bunch to the seed library. So if y'all feel like it and have room to plant and grow, then you can check out seeds from the seed library, plant them, grow them out, and bring them back. And then we'll just keep on sharing this bean. But you better not be planting it next to another bean now. It'll cross. So anyhow, that is Kermit Colleran. That's a word about this wonderful man. So the next one I thought we'd talk about is planting by the signs. And this again is just really abbreviated. There's a woman named Sarah Hall, Dr. Sarah Hall, professor up at Berea College, an agriculture professor, and she had a sabbatical, so she did something she'd always wanted to do. She interviewed all kinds of growers and farmers around Berea, Kentucky, and she wanted to know about the signs because she'd heard about it. She tried to decipher Farmer's Almanac, which if you don't know, they're pretty hard to read, can be. And she recorded recordings with several people and created this book called Sown in the Stars. And it kind of breaks down how sowing by the moon phases and the astrology calendar kind of go together. This comes from her book. These are the moon phases. And so astronomy and astrology, of course, are completely separate kind of entities, but with gardening and old-time wisdom, a lot of times they do intersect. And so astronomy is the study of celestial bodies or objects in the sky. And the only predictions made with these are concerning celestial events like solar eclipses and high and low tides. And astronomy does not make predictions like outcomes of haircuts or castrating calves or surgeries or business dealings and things like that. Those are in the realm of astrology. The basic terminology of this that you might hear is planted by the moon. That's what I call it. The moon phases, though, do affect fishing days, don't they? In this illustration, it's based on the moon cycle as it orbits around the Earth. And that small little line, the inner ring, shows approximately a 28-day cycle. And so you see the new moon is a term you'll hear all the time, and I see it on my calendars and things. The new moon is after it's full and it's gone away, and then it's starting to build and get brighter. That is what they call the waning moon, and it's growing in light. And the old moon, which some folks call it, and I call it that too, is the waxing moon, because I always get waning and waxing mixed up. And the old moon or the waxing moon is going and receding. So planting, your best times for planting a lot of times, my granddad, he lived in Mississippi, he used to say, you need to plant your corn before the full moon, right before the full moon of Easter. And that was his way of planting corn, and it always was good. It always worked out. But generally, your above-ground crops are going to do better in the waning or the new moon because they're growing up and they're growing up towards the light. And your below-the-ground or root crops are said to do better in a waxing moon because the gravitational pull in the water gets pulled down. That's the thought on that. And there are times that are better than others within these waning and waxing periods that overlap quite a bit. There are some days that are not good planting days within these times, and for that you want to consult your calendars. And I've got a picture of a calendar coming up. And let's look at that zodiac belt. So this represents a year. That inner solid line is the Earth's annual orbit. And it takes a whole year, to go around this, to go around this whole annual orbit. And the sun and constellations that correspond with this annual orbit are the astrology signs. You'll see those in the Farmer's Almanac and in the calendars. And let's look at the next one. The astrology man, I think we've probably all seen. So you've got all of the zodiac signs and how they correspond with different parts of the body. And this is generally represented as a feller. I thought, well, why don't I make a lady, zodiac lady, and make a new calendar? But you always see whatever, like for instance, I'm Aries at the top. If the sun is in that sign, that's not a good sign to be planting in. That is actually, sadly, seen as a barren sign. So you want to look at your signs, if you believe in this way, and plant accordingly, because you don't want to be planting during a killing day or a barren sign. You want to be in the real lush, growing signs. And if I have to go to the dentist, I'm not going to go to the dentist when the signs are in the head. I'm old school like that. I've crossed over, y'all. I believe in it. But so this is the astrology man. And if you see a sign that is in the bowels, that's a time you never ever want to make your kraut or do canned goods while the signs are in the belly. So and let's look at the next slide. And this shows, you know, your old school calendars. And all of these you're going to see, it shows you where the sign is, if it's in the heart, what the zodiac sign is, what the sign of the moon is. And at the top left there, my husband's crazy for fishing. That means it's a halfway good fishing day. If it's a solid fish, it's a good fishing day. And then it'll give you your prediction. So I love these old school calendars. You can't find them all that often. You used to be able to find them a lot more often. They tell you the signs, whether it's a good planting day, the position of the moon, and all those kinds of things. But also, you can just go as deep as this stuff as you want to. And that's just kind of a basic overview of planting with the signs. It's a lot to take in. If you really want to dig into this is just kind of a factual book. She didn't say her preferences either way or anything like that, but she will say that they had an old ornamental pear that they couldn't get rid of. So there are killing days. And she and her husband let their kids just whack on it with an axe, and that thing did not come back on a killing day. So, so if you're really interested, I'd recommend looking up this book. But better yet, ask an old-timer that knows the wisdom and can verbally tell you these things. I'm just a little newbie that just knows a tiny tidbit of things. So let's go to our next wonderful topic. This is Ida Spoon Wild. And this is the first day I met her. She said, well, welcome and come on in, and here's my porch. And her house is so pretty. She's got it so nice, and she's just this lovely woman. You may have met Iva. She and her buddy Connie, often, years past, they would cook over the open hearth at the Great Smoky Mountains Heritage Association. And they were there a lot during that Blue Ribbon Country Fair. She did that for 14 years. I mean, and it's hot during that time of year. It's burning hot. And here's Iva, Valentine's Day. A couple of years ago, I happened to be at her house, and she served me hot fudge cake. Yum! I mean, look at that, and look at her pantry. She cans all kinds of stuff. This woman can do anything. Just about anything, yes. I just love her to pieces. And she's jovial and shares her knowledge, and she wants to share, and she's the best cook. Well, so Ida Spoon Wild, for many years, she has been carrying on these old-time traditions. She grew up on a farm in Jefferson County and learned these old homesteading ways from her mother, her grandmother, and I believe her aunt. And she could dress a chicken at the age of 6. And I wanted to share this recording. This is Iva and her friend Connie about how they took cornbread on the hearth up at the Great Smoky Mountains Heritage Center.
For the cornmeal, now when they moved into a new area, you know, they might be the only family there. So there wouldn't be a meal. They'd have a gritter, they called it. Kind of looks like a grater that we'd have, but that's the matured corn. It'll be hard. So that's how they would grate that corn on the gritter, you know, and it would take a long time to grate enough cornmeal to make bread.
Boy, I
but
bet.
as families moved in, and most of the time when they moved to an area, they would move to a source of water, a creek or spring or something. So they would build a small tub mill. It doesn't take a high velocity of water to operate one of those. So for just a few families, that would supply, you know, enough meal for them. But as the communities grew, then they built the big mills like at Cades Cove or up at Old Mill in Pigeon Forge.
Yes.
The larger mills, and of course that supplied the whole community. But we still get our meal up at Old Mill in Pigeon Forge. They're very gracious to give that to us for the Blue Ribbon Country Fair. But I use unbolted white meal, and that means it hadn't been sifted and it has no additives. when you sift, you'll get part of the husk. So you'll save just a little bit of that and throw back in the bread you're making, and it'll give you a little crunch, which is real good. And then I said it had no additives, so you've got to add baking powder and soda, salt. And of course, I make mine with buttermilk, a couple of eggs, a stick of melted butter, which you've got to have. And then we cook it on the open hearth. Now, back in the old days, you would have a rip-roaring fire, in the fireplace. But we can't have that in the summertime. It would be too hot. So we use charcoal, and that gives us quick heat. And we bake it in a Dutch oven, and that's... Let's see, I won't say that it has little feet on it, but little pegs on the bottom. And that means that you can put coals underneath. It raises it up enough off of the hearth that you can put the coals underneath. And it has a concave lid and a little rim around it. And so you put coals on top. So it cooks it from the top and the bottom, just like your stove does at home. And at about 25 minutes, I will take it off the coals on the bottom and then just leave the ones on top. And it takes about 45 minutes for it to bake. It bakes pretty quick, but it has to brown, And so you're, like I say, 25 minutes, I'll take the coals out of the bottom because it will burn, So you know that about 20, 25 minutes it's done, browned on the bottom, and then it has to brown on top.
Doesn't it taste better done like that than out of the regular oven?
Listen, the people that come through there think that's the best cornbread they ever ate, and the beans they think's wonderful, but no beans this year.
How about that? I mean, cooking cornbread on that open hearth. Here is Iva at the Blue Ribbon Country Fair. This woman would clean up. You would get blue ribbon after blue ribbon, y'all. And I've got a little recording here about how to make butter.
Did I tell you how to make butter?
No, I meant to ask you. I'm so glad you brought that up. How do you do it?
Well, we do it because we don't have a cow. So we buy heavy whipping cream. And you just put it in a jar. You wouldn't probably want to put the whole quart, maybe a pint. And just gently shake. You have to have the cream at room temperature. I mean, don't want it too cold. If it's too cold, it's going to make whipped cream. If it's too warm, it won't gather. That's what you call it. Your butter will gather, into a clump.
Yes.
But just put it in a jar and just gently shake, just like this. And it'll take probably 10 minutes. And then it'll start making butter and clump up then together. And then you take that butter out of the jar and you wash it. That's what you call it. You wash it. You want to get all the milk out of it. If you keep that any length of time, it will sour. The milk will. So you wash it really well with cold water. And when you wash until you don't see any more milk come out. I mean, like clouded water come out of it. And you'll know that it's clean then, and a little salt. And but if you had a cow, you would milk the cow, and it would take several days. The cream will come to the top of the milk. And so you will skim that off and put it in your churn. And you'll do that several days until you get enough milk to make your butter. And it has to sour. That's where you get your buttermilk. And it will do it quicker if you'll put a little buttermilk in that, if you've got some buttermilk to put in it. But it has to sour. That's where you get your buttermilk. And you just churn it in a big churn. You've got the wooden churns or the crock churns. And the same process. When it gathers, then you're going to get it out and wash it and all that. And then it's nice to put it in a butter mold. When you've got a lot, you can mold it.
Yes.
And make it look real pretty. Otherwise, just put it in a bowl or something,
Yes. Have kind of round.
Yeah, just put it because you're going to be using it, But
that's something else. So when you put that cream in there over a course of days, and
now that's if you've got a cow and milk. But the heavy whipping cream. No, you want it right temperature. And you can tell the jar, how the jar feels,
If it's cold or too
Yeah,
hot.
you don't want too cold or not too warm. It just won't gather if it's too warm, but you don't want whipped cream either.
I've made that mistake before. Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, and that's Iva talking about how to make butter. And you know what? Let's go that one more slide. Here's all my particulars if you should want to get a hold of me. And also the web address for the Case Cove Preservation Association. You know, they're a nonprofit organization, and they can sure use everybody's help if these kind of stories are something you value.